Hello, today I'm going to give you a quick introduction into working with ink. I'm using Quink today. It has particular qualities which I really like, and I'm going to demonstrate those to you as we go along. So I've got some other bits here as well. I've got some powder ink. This one's made by Schminke, and I order this online. I will give you a link to that in the description. So I've got a copper in the bowl here. This one's actually a gold. It comes in a few different colours. I've got some household bleach. I've got salt, so I'm using some rock salt here. You can use fine salt as well. It does give you a slightly different effect, but really good to experiment with. So the bottles of ink that I've got are black, blue, blue. I've also got a green. This is a vintage one. It's not made anymore. The other one I've got is red, and I buy that in a cartridge and then just decant it into a little pot. Again, you can't buy those anymore. In terms of brushes, I'm just going to use a variety of brushes. I'm going to use a couple of rounds. I've got a rigger here, if you have one of those. I've also got some flat comb rakes in a couple of different sizes, so I'm going to show you those as well. So the great thing about the Quink is it dries a little bit quicker than watercolour. The colour is very intense, but unlike watercolour, it actually stains the paper. So you can't really lift it. Once it's on, it's on. But I guess that's where the bleach comes in, and you can get some really beautiful effects. So the black one particularly has a property which is called chromatography, which means some of the pigments separate out to give you some really beautiful colours. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you the colours on my little test strip here. I've got a little piece here. So I've got plenty of water. Now this does stain, it stains the paper, it will also stain your hands and your clothes as well. So just a little bit of water here. I'm going to start off with the black. So I'm just dropping this in. The blue-black is a beautiful turquoise colour. And then the blue is just a little bit brighter. Then we can mix all of those in together, of course. The green, I'm just going to take a little bit of this, show you. It's very, very bright. But when mixed with this blue, it will give us a really lovely turquoise colour. And you need so little of this, it goes an awful long way. The red again, very bright. Almost orangey. I'm going to show you that mixed with the blue. Let's put a little bit of blue down first. Clean that brush out. So what I'm really trying to do is not to mix these colours in together. So I've got a little bit of red here. Once over the blue. Can become a really nice purple colour. Let's add a tiny bit more of the blue with that. Oh, here we go. So those are the colours I'm going to use and combinations of. So the one thing I have got is plenty of paper towel. I know I'm going to need that. So here's a good opportunity to show you how the bleach works. I've dropped a tiny bit here. So unlike watercolour, if this was watercolour, I'd be able to put some water on that now, clear water, and lift that up. That won't happen with ink because it does actually stain the paper. But I am just going to get a tiny bit of bleach here. And you can see that will lift out. And we're going to use that to create some really nice little sample images over here. So I'd suggest the first time you use the bleach, rather than starting to try and use use them to do a whole painting, give yourself a little test piece first and try them out. So you can see here, I can bleach out these little marks. So do yourself, I don't know, I always do them in circles. Of course, even your test bits and your test strips can turn into little paintings as well. I think that's probably why I do them in the circles, just in case. You can always cut them out and put them onto a little greetings card or something like that. So here we go. I'm going to use the wet on wet method on this first one. So the chromatography that I was talking about, where the pigments separate out and make different colours, works best the more water that you have. So I am just putting plenty of water onto here, and then I'm going to drop in some black. I'm actually going to use some clean water. I'm going to make this very wet. Tiniest bits. I'm going to dry it off actually, because I don't want to get water into my ink either. So just put a little bit on the end. You don't need to load up your brush too much. And then that will start to move around. Off into there. So I've got 2 pots of water again here. One that I'm using to get the excess off, and then the other that I use if I need some clean water. So I can add a little bit more water onto here. And we can start to see that there's some really beautiful blues starting to come out as well. So whenever you're working with these inks, you have to go and work on the basis of serendipity. Things will happen, shapes will occur, and you kind of work with them. So I work fairly quickly with these. I might do myself 2 or 3 backgrounds and then decide what I'm going to put on top. I think it's lovely for seascapes. It makes fantastic skies. And it's really, really versatile. So just from that black, can you see already we're getting lots of different colours. So I'm going to make this one the salt demo while it's still wet. Just going to grab some of the salt, pop that in over the top, and then we'll come back and have a look at that later on. So the second one here, again, I'm just going to do black, and I'm going to get lots of water with it again, and we're going to see what happens with this chromatography. We're going to see if we can start to get some metallic colours coming out. So exactly the same thing. In with the black. I'm going to drop some water onto this as well. So I'm going to leave that for a moment. Now I shall add some more water to it in a moment. I'm just going to do this corner one here because I want to show you how bleach works and how we can create images using the bleach. But that needs to dry off first. So I'm just going to pop that colour in there. Make this one a mixture. I'm going to do some black at the bottom. So I've got really the tiniest little bit of ink here and spreading it around. So one of these bottles of ink costs anywhere sort of between £8 and £10, I think, but they will last you an awful long time. You can buy them in a smaller size as well. So I've got my black on there. Wash that off. A little bit of the blue black. Just drop that in. I think this is a really beautiful colour. And then when that's dried, I'm going to show you how to create images with the bleach. Now while that's drying, I'm going to come back into here. I'm just dropping some water in. You can already see it's starting to make some really interesting shapes. A little bit more water around here. And we'll start to see some colour changes fairly soon. So if we go back to this first one, I could already see around some of this salt, we're starting to get some really interesting textures, and some of the metals are starting to come out. On this one here, I'm going to show you what happens and how it works if we sprinkle in some of this metallic powder. So I'm going to use my nice blue one here. So I haven't got any water on this. I'm just going to go straight in. This is a beautiful bright blue. Now these will fade over time, so if you do a painting with them, never hang them in daylight, in bright direct sunlight rather. They will fade over time. So if you've got a painting that you really love, best thing to do, keep it safe and perhaps do some prints from it. So I've done a whole series of paintings with ink using all of these techniques I'm going to show you today. All based on birds and nature. So it was called Down by the Water. And it was the things that I see from the narrowboat that I live and work on. So there we go, got a beautiful blue now. And I'm just going to grab some of my copper. So you can see this is a powder. I'm just going to grab that and sprinkle it on. And that will have a really lovely effect. Let's see what happens when that dries off. And obviously you can use that in combination with your salt, your bleaches, other things. So it's just building up some techniques. And the more you practice, the more beautiful effects that you will get. So now I'm just going to show you a couple of colour blends here. I'm going to stick to this large brush. So I really like this. This can really work so well in many ways, this brush. It's got a really lovely point to it, so I can use it on its side. I can just put a little bit of paint on, but I can also just use this tip to get some really nice detail as well. So make sure you get yourself one of these really large brushes and make sure it's got a nice point on it and look after it. So now I'm going to do a colour blend. I'm actually going to use some of my clean water now. Let's start off here. I'm going to take some of the red first. Pop that at the top. So I'm just dropping this in, letting the water do the work. There we go. Clean off. And there. So we really don't want to be mixing these colours in the jars. I'm going to go in and get some blue, overlap. So again, rather than painting, almost just dropping in. Can you see this beautiful purple? Lovely. I'm going to pull that blue down, and then I'm going to add some green in to the bottom here, and we should get a really lovely turquoise. So I love the way that they mix in with each other. You can do this with watercolour paint, but it definitely works better with ink. And the way they're overlapping, absolutely great. So back in, clean that brush off, and then I'm just going to grab a little bit of green, tiniest bit, on the bottom here. So now I should get a really lovely green into turquoise blend. So like I say, this green's not easy to get hold of. Sometimes you can find it second hand. It does command quite a high price. I have seen them go for sort of up to £30 or £40 a bottle. So if you happen to ever see one, and it's a reasonable price, make sure you pick one up. There we go, these are our lovely blends. I'm also going to put a little bit of salt onto this one as well, just down one side. I'm going to come back and have a look at some of these ones up here that we worked on earlier. So this one I'm just going to use a dry brush, so I'm going to get a fresh brush. So these we've all kept very wet and we've got the blending. You can also use this for getting some really nice sharp marks, mark making, and we can do that with, I can probably go in with actually with a larger brush. This is a very dry brush. I'm going to get my black again. I'll go back to my test strip. Actually almost take a little bit of ink off. I'm going to use the side of the brush. So without the water, we can get some really nice textures. So this is lovely if you're doing animals, birds, feathers, that sort of thing. I'm just going to fill in around the edge. And I'm going to come back in later and bleach that. I'm going to use one of those flat comb rakes and show you how to make amazing feathers as well. I'm just going to fill that. So I think as with everything, when you get a new material, best thing to do, just practice with it. I can almost guarantee the first thing you'll do is probably put far too much ink on. But it's definitely a wonderful learning process, and the flexibility of this as a medium is great. There we go, so I've got that on dried now. Just clean that off. So let's have a look before I demonstrate the bleach to you. Here, there's some amazing colours coming out. Again, with this one, bearing in mind that this is just black, around the edge here, we're starting to get some of these metallic colours, and this is the chromatography, where those pigments are separating out. And as that dries off, this will stay active and changing for anything up to sort of 10 hours. I've discovered, I've done a painting, put it to one side, come back, and the colours have changed completely. So that's what I say, you have to be prepared to go along with it a little bit. Definitely some serendipity. Again here, where we've dropped in the metallics, it's having some beautiful effects here. So that powder will dry off, it will settle where it's touched the ink and got wet, it will settle and it will actually form itself into an ink as well. So it won't brush off, it will actually stay on there. So here, where I've got some excess on, can you see that's going to stay on there. So this one is where we blended the colours. So we've got a lovely purple, really nice green, turquoise, and our salt again is doing its thing and it's pulling out some of that colour. So this one is almost dry. I'm just going to show you on here what happens if you start to paint and draw with ink. So I'm going to leave that for a moment. I'm going to prepare my bleach, and then I'm going to come in and show you the detailing. So I've finished with my inks at the moment. I'm just going to put my lids back on before I show you the detailing. But these are ever changing. And I can see the top two that I did in the black. I've got some amazing effects. So this does dry a little bit quicker than watercolour because it does soak right into the page. I should have said earlier, I'm actually using a textured 300 GSM paper here. It's a watercolour paper. Again, you can use smooth. This just happened to be what I had to hand. So here we've started to get some amazing metal colours. A really beautiful pale blue. On this one here, again the metal's coming out and you can start to see some of the changes just here. So now on these bottom two, they're almost dried. I just want to show you working with bleach on top of these. So this one's slightly drier. I'm actually going to show you how when I'm painting birds, I get the feathery effect. So I'm using this. This is called a flat comb rake. It's a really lovely brush. Again, we'll put a link in the description here of how you can get hold of these. They come in lots of different sizes. They also come with different gaps in them as well. These are similar, just one slightly larger than the other. But just get yourself one small one. You don't need a whole variety of them, and you can use these for lots of different things. So I'll just show you, again, I'll just use my little scrap piece of paper here. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of ink from here. There we go. So if I were doing grasses, this is a great brush. I'm getting a really lovely effect. You can see exactly the same way that you would do fur onto animals. So I'm going to use it to create some feathers. So I've got my bleach here. I've got a little bit of water on my brush, a little bit of the bleach. I'm just going to use it to build up. So I'm holding my brush quite a long way down. I want some nice control over this. I'm crossing them over. And the bleach, when it pulls out from the black, gives us these wonderful colour effects. So the more water I have, the paler these will become. And then you can imagine just building up a whole bird or a section of a bird or an animal. This works really well for foxes and sparrows. I've done a couple of sparrow paintings as well that have worked really well with this. So obviously we're just working on a small section now, but imagine that on something larger where you're going to build up these amazing layers. I'm just going to pop the lid off of the black again. So the main thing is you want to, once you've had your brush in the bleach, you want to make sure you change out your water frequently and give them a really good clean off. So that's my brush. Should be nice and clean. I'm just going to use a little bit in here, in the lid. So a combination of bleaching and then going back over the top. It's a really lovely effect. So now let's look at this one. I'm going to bring some little flower heads out of this. I'm going to do that with my rigger. I've got a detail brush here too. Let's put all my brushes in the right place. There we go. I have a rigger here. These are a really useful brush. Again, very flexible. You can use them in lots of different ways. If you hold it down here, it can be used as a detail brush, and that's what we're going to do today. If you hold it further up, much looser, it's absolutely great for doing landscapes, trees, that sort of thing. So if you've ever seen one of my trees masterclasses, you'll know this is my favourite brush for doing trees. So a little bit of water again, dip into the bleach. I'm going to hold it down here and see how the colour changes. So it will come out this orangey metal colour on the black, and as soon as it turns to the blue, it pulls out a slightly different colour. So I'm going to use this to put some grasses on. Now I've only had one dip into the bleach and the water. It does last an awful long time. I think it has a really lovely ethereal effect. Almost otherworldly, I think. I'm just going to pop in again. Water, a little bit of bleach. I mean, you need the tiniest amount. Just going to put myself a seed head on here. I've got a nice stalk. I'm going to start at the middle. Use this brush to flick it out. There we go, a little more bleach and another layer. So you can see gradually it's starting to emerge. You have to have patience here. Don't expect an immediate result. It can take a few moments to actually work. So don't be tempted to put more and more on. Just wait and see what happens. So I've got a really nice delicate sort of flower head, cow parsley shape here. I get some pure bleach. There's no water with this now. I'm going to use this on the end. So even with something as simple as household bleach, you can still get lots of different effects depending on the brush you use, how you use that brush, the amount of water you put in. So I hope this has given you lots of inspiration. I look forward to seeing what you're all going to create with this. And remember, the main thing is to have fun, experiment with this, see what works and what doesn't. Just going to put in some slightly thicker grasses here. I'm going to push that down. So again, I'm using the brush in a completely different way. So I'm on the tip, right on the top, and then I'm pushing, giving it a wiggle and a slide. That's given me a completely different effect again. So my ink at the top here hasn't quite dried off, but you can see the effect that the salt has had. So once that's dried, I would sweep that off and you'll see some of the beautiful effects underneath. You can see it already on this one here, exactly what's happening. This almost reminds me of batiking and silk painting. So just with a few simple inks, some household bleach, bit of salt, metallic powders, we're able to get a huge variety of effects and techniques. I hope that's been useful, and I look forward to painting with you again soon.